Welcome to Design Muse Podcast, a podcast meant to inspire, educate, and advocate on all things commercial interior design. I am your co-host, Bridget Santos.
And I'm Melanie Hanna.
We are Design Muse Podcast.
Welcome back to Design Muse Podcast. We are so excited to have this virtual session today, all about the Design Muse brand and how we came up with Design Muse and how our journey has been starting a podcast and all the ins and outs that we've learned along the way, and also all the decisions that we had to make throughout the whole process. So we are so excited for this episode and excited to share this with all of our listeners. Hey, Mel.
Hey, girl. How's it going?
Going good. I mean, when it comes to this podcast, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when it comes to why we even started it in the beginning?
So it's funny, I got asked this question earlier today when I was getting my hair done, and I was telling my hairstylist about our story and how we met in Louisiana and how I'd hired you right out of school, and we just really hit it off and worked really well together. I told her a little bit of our first episode about how our journey and we met and how we were getting together for these lunches, and we were talking about construction administration and details and contracts, and we became a good resource for each other back and forth. And, one day when I got your text and you said, "Hey, do you want to start a podcast?" It was just instantaneously yes, right? So we explained a little bit of that in our first episode and our journey with that, but there was a lot that came with it. And as an interior designer, we didn't know exactly what we were stepping into with a podcast, which is the fun part, right? The learning and the lessons learned along the way. I think our biggest thing, starting from the very beginning, what we did is once we decided we were going to do this, we actually used Miro and we set up goals, and we still use it to this day to outline our podcast, outline just everything, our to-do list, our social media, our topics, who we want to bring on. But I think one of our first goals was, who are we and our why? And that transposed in a lot of different ways. So we didn't skew each other's ideas, and it really was genuine. We dumped all these different ideas into Miro of words that meant something to us or phrases that meant something to us that we really thought would be relatable back to our mission and our values, which we didn't quite understand what that was yet, did we?
And, it's kind of funny because as an interior designer, you always start with this concept, right? That you're pushing through in your whole project. And it's almost like we treated the podcast the same way. We started with this concept and this goal that we wanted to really advocate and educate on commercial design. And we've really always go back to that. So kind of the same process we use with design, we're using here with always remembering why we started this, what our purpose is, and what our goals are.
So speaking of that, with our goals, I think initially you and I felt like this was a really great creative outlet to be an advocate. So advocate was a really good word for us. Our tagline is to inspire, educate, and advocate. And the reason why I came up with that is those were our brand pillars, which just like a project, having a brand pillars, that's how that transposed. We wanted to inspire those that don't know anything about commercial interior design, or they think that they do. We wanted to be able to inspire people differently and educate what we do, and then advocate for all the different things, just show another level of it and show all the different people that are tied to that is really important, because there's a lot of people that touch a project that you don't even realize that you see the architect and you see the lead interior designer, but you don't see the 20-man team behind the architect, or the 10-man, 3-man, 4-man, whatever interior design team, or maybe it's 2, maybe it's 1, but you don't see all the other players behind it. And you don't see on the general contracting team, you'll see the general contractor, but you don't see the 50 subs that they have. That was exaggeration, likely, for most projects, but there's different trades involved. So we wanted to be able to bring that to the table. And then I think also just provide another layer of networking group was another one of our goals. We had no idea. We're in 14 countries now. How do you feel about that?
I feel amazing about that. I mean, I think it is so cool that I know we have such a niche audience when it comes to commercial interior design, and it's not everybody's thing to want to know about commercial interior design, but it is so cool the amount of people we've been able to reach and, different countries to really talk about what goes into commercial interior design. Because at the end of the day, your day-to-day life is always probably walking into a space that an interior designer has touched. So although it's a niche kind of audience of this interior design commercial industry, it's also, really speaking to people who are just experiencing commercial interior design as well.
For sure. So when you're starting a podcast, there are so many different layers of it. We did not know. We YouTubed, we sent each other articles. I mean, I feel like every other day we were sending something to each other saying, okay, here's what so-and-so said about the equipment. We had some really good guidance along the way. There were a few podcasts like Cool Ass People podcast, CRE, Unscripted. There was several people that just were open and shared what to do and what not to do and what platforms to use. And so there were a lot of lessons learned along the way. But I think the first thing is you really have to choose your theme or your focus, because that becomes your brand identity. So people know us as we're going to bring anything to the commercial industry in different light to it and bring honest conversations. So that's what we're known for. Will that evolve over time? Likely, but at the core of it, that's what we're about, and that's what people are starting to know us as. Episode style is huge, so we had to really evaluate, and we've pivoted along the way. So we're doing virtual interviews now because we're both moms, we both run companies, we both are leaders, project managers, interiors. We wear a lot of different hats, and we're soccer moms on the side and hustling kids around. So we know that we can't always be in person. So that was one of our pivots along the way. But we wanted to have a one-on-one conversation between us co-hosts, but we also wanted to have an interview style. So when you're interviewing people, do your research on how you want to do it, because there's a storytelling aspect to it. Sometimes there's just candid conversations. There's a little bit of a hybrid. Sometimes you can have a panel discussion. And the one thing that we learned is audio is the hardest thing of the podcast. You have to have quality audio or you're going to have a heck of a time editing it. And we still struggle with that sometimes. And if you listen to our first podcast, just keep in mind we're interior designers first, and we've evolved over time.
Yes, give us some grace on that first episode. But
Yeah.
I will say, it's been so cool to see the journey and how much better it's gotten every time, because if there's one thing about me and Mel and Design Muse podcast is we're not going to stop until we get it right. And I think that's just a testament to the people we are, the way we work, the values that we share. But it's also important, you talked about interviews, style and how we're bringing people on. It was so important to us that people heard outside of our voices and saw all of the wavelengths of the industry, from developers to different sectors to everything. We really didn't want it to be all about us and all about our voices, but really about the commercial interior design industry as a whole.
Yeah, that's very true, because that collective. We talked about that a little bit in our last episode with Kyle Bunting. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen. It's phenomenal. We talk a lot about collaboration, and bringing all those third-party voices is an important part of that level of creativity of your brand. So I feel like that is very relative to who we are. One of the biggest things that we learned also is understand the length of the podcast. The first one, it did get kind of lengthy for us. I think we just dove right in. I'll be really honest with you. I don't think we looked up even how to use the equipment. We plugged it in and we said, let's go, girl. And that was just, that's kind of who we are a little bit, is like, we're going to test the waters and then we're going to evolve along the way. And I think that that's an important lesson learned. Bridget, I think you would agree with me on this, that, sometimes you just have to dive right in and dive in scared, because I was a little nervous nervous about trying to figure out this audio. And then we just dove in and we did it. And we thought, okay, all right, we got this. That was the hardest part, is diving in. And I think understanding your episode length is so important. So we no longer record over an hour. Our episodes that we record, and this is with cutting out stuff, we really want to stop at about 45 minutes. And it doesn't matter what episode, we don't want to go much longer than that. Some of them go a little bit longer, but once you get in your front end intro, your back end intro, it really starts to get kind of lengthy. So we never, from here on out, we're trying to stay under that 60-minute category. And that helps us do that with all the added things that you have to add in. And I think frequency too, right? So how often are you posting?
I will say the frequency situation has probably been the most thing that we've adapted on throughout the process. I mean, we went from being like, we're going to record, this amount of times and do this amount of episodes. But at the end of the day, we kind of take what's thrown at us, what the listeners are wanting to hear, what the feedback is. And we're kind of, that kind of rolls into what we plan to talk about every episode, like how we're even mapping out these topics and these ideas that we're discussing. And a lot of it are late night texts between me and Mel saying, hey, I had this issue this week. I think it's something that we can bring up and really talk about and try to provide light to this situation. Or, hey, we've already brought on somebody who's on the, developer side. We've brought somebody on that's on a corporate sector design side. Let's bring in a great artist, Kyle Bunting, collaborator who really just mixes it up and gives us a little bit different of a flavor. So I think it's important when you're mapping out your topics and figuring out what you want to talk about, that you keep that excitement and that flair between episode and episode.
And I think one of the first things that we did is we just dove right in. And I remember one of our tech friends contacting me and saying, hey, Mel, this is amazing, but where's your intro? And I was like, I didn't even think about our intro. I thought it was just music and whatever, but really it is important to introduce the episode, not just dive in and banter a little bit back and forth, or describe what you're going to be talking about, introduce the person you're interviewing. So think about those different styles. We're evolving over time, like we mentioned. So sometimes we actually will go back and record that first intro part. And I'm not talking about the music intro. I'm talking about the intro to the episode of, hey, welcome back, that kind of thing. Here's what we're talking about today. And we'll record it after the fact because we listen back and it's percolating different ideas that come up of things that might have been really important that we didn't plan on. Because we want our conversations to be organic. We do go into it with a high level topic. Sometimes we've tried giving list of questions out, but what we've realized is that the best conversations come with keeping it high level. And that's different for everybody, right? So if someone asks us for specific questions, we will give them. But the high level topics have seemed to really make the conversations a lot more organic for us and our guests. And I think, creating a calendar of some sort. So going back to Miro, we actually have a calendar in there that is for our episodes. We try to stick to it as much as possible. We set a weekly meeting so that we always know that we have time to talk that's designated because we're busy ladies. And, it gives us an opportunity. We try to record during those times too, so that it's always on our calendar and it's always available, right? The other thing that I think is important is having a guest strategy of how are you preparing your guest on what they can experience. Bridget, you want to talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned we've learned with mics and with some of the things that we tell our guests before they come on?
Absolutely. So at first, bringing on a guest, we were just so excited that somebody wanted to come on and that someone said yes, to be honest. Like we didn't know how this was going to go. We didn't know if it was going to have outreach or, anything like that. We have learned that bringing people on also introduces like the audience of followers that they have and a greater outreach. And some of the things that we have learned and tell our guests when they come on is, keep your mouth close to the mic and try not to pull away from the mic, and let's not all talk over each other. Let's provide that space for everybody to talk and then move on to the next person who can talk. If there's a weird pause, we can always make that work on the editing side. It's better than a jumbly mess of everybody talking at the same time. We always tell our guests, don't worry about the ums, the likes, all the things, because at the end of the day, there is amazing editing softwares out for that. We personally use Riverside, and we found such an amazing process with Riverside, and we even record directly into Riverside as well. And there's so many tools that can help with that. A lot of guests are nervous. They're nervous to say something wrong. They're nervous that it's not going to make any sense. And I think a big thing that we really try to do is just say, hey, we're going to have this organic conversation. Don't worry. If you end up saying something that you don't want to go out there, just let us know. This is not the end all be all. We make them feel very comfortable, because it's not like we're on a Lifetime TV show that, anything that we say is going to be announced immediately. We have time to edit it. And we've learned throughout guests. I mean, we even had a time where we just couldn't even use that guest in that episode at all, because the room we recorded in, it just wasn't right. So there's just situations that you come across that you learn from and keep going. But I think the ultimate thing about bringing guests onto your podcast is make them feel comfortable. Sit in a chair, set them up in a situation where they're comfortable when they're sitting. They're not swaying back and forth constantly. They're not lean too back, lean too, all the things. So body placement, when you're comfortable when you're sitting, you're comfortable when you're talking. So at the end of the day, making your guest feel comfortable is, the ultimate goal.
It really is. So some of the funny things, this is the first episode we recorded. I had these dangly earrings on. I didn't realize it. They're really not dangly. They were little gold hoops that had a little bead on them. And when I shook my head, because apparently I talk with my head and I move my head. So we were editing back, and all I could hear was this like, ding, like you can hear it because you're so close to the mic. So we always tell guests to make sure that you're not wearing anything that jingles, because that's another thing. It's harder to edit out because it does pick up on that. Another thing that we had a really fun experience with, and I'm going to tell off, see if I can not laugh while I'm telling this. So Bridget and I, again, we're interior designers. We're not audio experts, right? So we have what's called, we get these mics out, and the first episode we had a little bit of acoustical issues. And so we thought the piece that we didn't install, which is called a pop filter, we thought that it went on the back side of the mic so that your reverb didn't go to like somebody else, was our thinking. And I think it was like 3 guests in, we finally realized I was on Instagram or something and saw a singer with the pop filter in front of them. And we realized at that very moment, it was a late night text again. Bridget gets this Instagram reel, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just looked this up. We've been doing this all wrong.
And by the way, anyone who knew that and saw us on video and didn't say anything, I mean, you guys let us know, okay, if we're doing something wrong, because we posted many, many real videos of us using that on the back side of the mics instead of on the front side of the mics, thinking we were so tech savvy and that we knew what we were doing. And then I get a late night text of a reel from Melanie, and it's like, oh my gosh, we have been doing this wrong the whole entire time. And I'm like, no one said anything. I had no idea.
Well, the funny part is our voice actually sounded better. So we thought, we were proud of ourselves. So there's going to be things along the lines, and we just got some new equipment. We're going to be adjusting and trying to figure out right along the way. So do your research on everything, watch videos, including placements of different things. And you're going to also, there's another thing when you're looking at your equipment, it's really important to do tons of research, and there's a balance. So when we're starting out, you're putting up the money for all these things, right? So you might not want to just jump right into expensive mics, but they make actually a huge amount of difference. So we have different brand mics that we use, and this is the Shure mic. We love it. It has really great sound. The other mic that we have is maybe a little bit lesser quality. It still has great sound to it, but we've just been adjusting and playing over time. As we start to be a little bit more successful, we're able to have those opportunities to use those different types of things. But the equipment, the sound, it really is worth investing in if you're serious about it. And ask technology folks about different things that they would suggest, and ask other podcasts. So we leaned out there, and I had a friend that had started his own podcast. His name's Jamie Adams at Scorpion. He's like a marketing guru. And I said, hey, okay, listen, your audio sounds fabulous. How are you editing this? We're outsourcing it to some guy in New Zealand, and it's back and forth, and we have to listen. And he said, oh, no. Use Riverside. Just record in Riverside, edit it in Riverside. You edit it like a Word document. And, so I asked, he was transparent about equipment. So ask us what equipment we use. Ask other people. Don't be afraid to ask those questions, because much like us, we've had lessons learned along the way, and we are more than happy to share what we feel like works or doesn't. The mics also, there's dynamic mics, and there's different types of mics. So it picks up your voice differently. So really do your research too, because some of the mics pick up more noise than others. And it's just one of those things to just be aware of and not just buy anything.
I will say this podcast community has been so great. Anytime that we go to somebody and ask questions, or on the collaborations we're working on with different manufacturers, and need some guidelines from someone who's done it before. We have been so thankful for everybody who has guided us and given us any tips along the way. We're new to the podcasting. We're new to having collaborations with manufacturers. We're new to these items, and, just having a community that will have your back and kind of say, hey, think about it this way, or, hey, yeah, I did that before, but make sure you do X, Y, and Z, or it's this percentage, or just little tidbits here and there. And we are very thankful for everybody who's helped us along the way.
So step back a little bit. We used a Zoom recorder to begin with instead of Riverside. So we would have an SD card, and we would put our recordings on our laptop, and we'd send it off to our editor. That was our first way of doing it. Like we said, we've transposed that to Riverside. We still use the recorder. We're about to start recording directly into Riverside for even our in-person ones, which we're really excited to try that out. But another thing to really think about is how you're going to edit it, and how you're going to, if you want to edit it yourself, if you want to outsource it, and just talk to several people, because there's also podcast studios in local areas too. We didn't have the funds to do that. So we actually partner with the local showroom. Shout out to Tangram Interiors. They've been fabulous. They said they've opened their doors with wide arms every single time we've asked, and we just really appreciate that partnership. But not everybody has that. And so just make sure you're recording in a soundproofed room if you can, especially if you're not in an office or not at home, because it does make a difference on the sound quality for sure. Then once you have that audio, you're taking it, and you have to, there's layers. So it'll record it all together, and then it'll record each individual voice. So we'd highly recommend making sure you have each individual voice and editing it that way, because there's a lot of sound transfer that happens on certain mics. And so that's been the way that we've learned to be able to edit it out.
And it has been super helpful to have me and Mel be able to kind of tag team this. There'll be times that I'm editing and I'm like, hey, listen to, 3313 on this time frame. Just cannot figure out how to silence the X, Y, and Z, or how to figure it out. And having a partner that you can go to and say, hey, can you jump in there and just see what's going on, and vice versa. It's been great to be able to have that person. So if you are just podcasting by yourself, maybe you find a mentor or somebody that you can kind of help collaborate on and make sure that, hey, I'm getting stumped. I don't know how to do this on the editing side, but you have some type of resource where you can ask a question, whether it's an outside source that you're paying or mentor within this podcast community. I think that's so important that you kind of know that you have someone to go to when you get stumped, because you will get stumped.
You will absolutely get stumped. And when you start to listen to it so many times, it all starts to blur together. And so sometimes having that backup of, I'll go to Bridget and say, does this sound better? And we'll export out. There's another thing. So if you use Riverside, it does compress some of the audio. So you have to export it out to see if it really is a high level. And they have a lot of great tools on there, like echo cancellation, and just you can change the tone of voices. So say I have a cold and I'm very muffled, you can actually use AI, which is incredible, to be able to edit some of that. You just have to be careful because it can sound too robotic. So we try not to edit out too much. We do edit out big pauses, big ums, things of that nature. But it when it comes down to it, it really honestly sounds better, more natural. And so we'll actually take on an entire chunk of a topic versus taking out just ums if we can't get it to sound correctly.
I totally agree. And nobody wants to listen to a robot. We're humans here talking, so it needs to sound like humans. We're not perfect. We say like, we say we say so. It's fine sometimes, but of course you want to edit it to a point where it's smooth and it's an easy listen. But the most organic episodes have been the best for us, and really just focusing on our topics and being able to not have quite as much editing in the background. That's one thing. After you do it a couple of times, you know certain things not to do because you know you're going to have to spend the time to go edit it. You just pick up along the way, and you just learn along the way. So that's been super helpful as well.
Let's talk about intro and outro. Bridget and I went back and forth on this because your music you pick is a vibe and it tells a lot about who you are. So we wanted something that was spunky, creative. That was a really hard thing for us because we didn't really understand at the time. We were trying to figure out what music we could and couldn't use because there's copyrights on things and trademarks. We actually were able to find one that we actually tag as this is that music. So eventually if we take off, we may have to look at a different route on that. But if you're not like Taylor Swift famous, there are resources out there where you can get free or almost free where you're just spending a little bit, but you need to make sure you can't just steal any kind of music, and you need to make sure it's appropriate for a podcast, and it's also doesn't have copyrights that are associated with it. When we upload to Buzzsprout is what we use for our platform. When we upload to it, we actually have a tag that's the same exact, giving that person credit for that music. And that's really, really important. Don't overlook that. We looked to a professional, to the person that was editing our episodes originally. He actually created our intro and outro for us, and we reuse those every time now. So it made it a little bit easier. If you are working with somebody, go ahead and ask them to export out your intro and outro so you have it just in case you decide to pivot like we did.
Exactly. And I think pivoting along the way is what has kind of gotten us to the point today. And by no means are we experts and can tell you exactly the way things are done, because we are learning every single episode and learning every single time. But I will say with the music, I'm like, oh yeah, let's do like Thunderstruck as our, and then it's like, oh wait, no, you cannot do that. There's, but there are websites and all the things out there where there's specific podcast intro, outro, and that helped guide us along the way. But that was definitely one of the things that I was like, wasn't expecting to run into that, but makes a lot of sense.
Wasn't on my
I
radar.
just didn't think of it. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
it just wasn't. And so that's a decision you have to make. Much like interior design, we make hundreds of decisions. The podcast is very similar to that. We had mentioned earlier about brand and DESIGN MUSE brand, what we wanted it to be. And so from the very, very beginning, we were not going to be not intentional. So our branding, our color palette, our fonts, our logo, our emblem. It's all intentional. It's all related. It's all part of our story and our ethos. And with that, we decided to use Canva as a platform. We set up our brand standards within Canva. We pivot sometimes and we test the waters on certain things. But for the most part, we stay within our color palette. We're trying to stay within the release of Meet the Muse post is the same as it was day one. Will we pivot along the way? Sure. But for the most part, we try to keep within our brand standards. And social media is a monster. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It's the best way to get out your voice. It's the best way to get out your brand. It's the best way to get followers, but it is a interesting animal. I'm just going to say that. We've tested the waters on, we paid for ads, which works, but for the most part, it's been bringing on the right guest and collaborating with them and then the gaining momentum. And we were laughing over this last month that we're finally getting people following us that aren't our family and friends.
It's a huge step.
It's huge. Yeah. And so it's growing every day, but I think also you have to know like what your intent is. So you're not going to go into podcasting and make money day one. A lot of people say you'll start making money after that year mark because you have intentional guests, you have that momentum. And some people luck out, and that's great. We're not necessarily doing it for the money. We're doing it for the advocacy and the creative joy of doing it. We've kind of kept that in mind this entire time. And so when we've paused for a minute and we haven't stayed on our posting schedule, it's not a race to us. And it's more about getting it right than anything.
Right. And one thing that we talked about when we were bringing guests on, to your point, is we were getting a little stressed out about who was going to come on and is this the right person to come on and do they represent our brand and what we're trying to do. And then we just stopped one day and said, let's just take a breath. And we're only going to bring on people who we are 100% for sure know, then there's no question asked. So you have, to Mel's point, like make sure that you stay within your original concept of the podcast. You always have to go back to, why are we doing this? Let's not just bring on anybody to talk. And we don't want a negative atmosphere. We don't want to come on here and talk negatively. We just wanted a certain style. And we found that out through time. We had to take a little breath and a little pause to say, okay, that's not the route we want to go. We want to only bring people on that are 100%. And from there, we'll just do both of us sessions. We don't have to have someone come on every single time because it does have stress to it. You want to make sure they're taken care of. We want to make sure to give them a little gift. We want to make sure that they feel the Design Muse experience. And that's super important for us. I would say me and Mel are pretty much perfectionists. So this process, we have learned to provide ourselves grace and just the podcast in general grace, and just know that it's not going to be perfect. You're going to stutter. You're going to say some words weird. You're not going to look right on camera. It's just some things are going to go that way, and that's okay. And we've just learned to kind of go with it from that standpoint.
Another thing is, when you start out a podcast, you're not used to hearing your own voice. And all I can say is own your own voice, own the things that you do. I change topics a lot mid-sentence. It's my ADHD, but that's the endearing thing about, if you know me truly, that's just who I am. And I'm not going to change that. We started to really just make sure that we're really thinking about not overthinking the editing part, but really having core values of topics that really mean something and that people want to hear, that they're going to get something out of. And so moving on, so you basically record all this, you do all these different steps, right? And now we talked a little bit about hosting. So when you go to host, there's a lot of different websites you can go to. We chose Buzzsprout because it seemed like it was easy enough. There was a little bit of a setup to it. Basically, you set up an account, you pay a monthly fee to it, and you set up accounts with certain groups. So what I mean by that is we took our email address, and which is a Design Muse podcast email address, and we created different accounts within Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, YouTube. Some of it'll do within that Buzzsprout because it takes your feed and it'll automatically create it for you. YouTube was one that we had to create our own account. That was a big one. And that way we also can upload videos to it, and it kind of it keeps its own data, if that makes sense. It won't actually give you all the data from YouTube to Buzzsprout. And that was just a choice we made on this, but it does get very confusing. So please reach out if you have any questions on it. So Spotify and Apple, once you're approved, which is usually the 24-hour period, because we were kind of confused about that too, is you upload it, how long do you wait? And really, it's really, really quick once you do your first one. So you have to wait 24 to 48 hours typically for the first one of getting approved on all the sites, and then you're good to go. We actually did little testers that we would send our family. And so you can do that too, and then release the final release too. There's options on that, but you know what? Just hit that submit button, because you could overthink it to death. And it's just not, the little things don't matter as much.
I totally agree. And kind of going along with that and how we're technically releasing the podcasts, it's the other side of things, the end user. How are we getting engagement? How are we getting listeners? How are we getting anybody that's interested in this Design Muse podcast? And I think it's so important to just build a community of people that are interested in this topic, but also, when we started our social media accounts, start following other people that are inspiring and that are trying to do something too. And in turn, they see that we're trying to also do that. I think that's super important with the end goal of the listener and your growth and your engagement into. Because at the end of the day, of course, we would love to monetize this podcast and make sure that our time is well spent and that we're getting collaborations and we're getting something after it. But at the end of the day, like Mel said, our reason for this was just to advocate and educate. So if none of that came, we still would love to be doing what we're doing with Design Muse podcast. We love the community that we're creating within Design Muse podcast, from all the muses and meet the muses. And we hope that one day we get all the muses together once a year to do some type of an event. I mean, we just love the community and the outreach that we've been able to engage with. And that's really a networking tool at the end of the day.
It really is. And I think with that being said, I've also learned a lot from our muses. And I think a good way for us to end today is to recap a little bit of that. So for me, with Christina Fisher with Toll Brothers was one of our first muses. And God bless her for trusting us to come on and be our first muse. That woman is amazing. And if you have not listened to that episode, go back, because it is packed full with energy and just inspiration. The biggest thing that I learned from her was really just being so passionate, because she talked about how it was so natural for her early on to be collaborating and designing and all the architecture stuff. And her story along the way, she made reference to, it was just so easy when we were collaborating. It's because she is so passionate about what she does. And I think when she went from designer to developer, it just reminded me of the fact that so many people feel stuck in their career and they're really passionate about something, but they have blinders on and don't really realize there's a whole nother career path out there that you don't really know. So it was a good reminder for me personally of just don't feel stuck in just the moment you are right now, because you may end up being something totally related to that. And for her, it was development, which was such a natural path.
And I think it's really cool because the way that me and Mel kind of bring on those people and what we learn from, and one of my favorite things is, on Jess Collins' episode, I had never met her before she came on, but Melanie has a great relationship with her. And now in turn, I'm so thankful that how much I learned in that episode from her, and also the continued relationship that we have. She said something that stuck with me to my core in that episode. It was something simple, not even related to interior design. It kind of had to do with more of the management style that she approaches. And she said, just because someone doesn't have kids or a family doesn't mean that they don't deserve the same amount of time off or the same amount of grace to do the things that you would allow somebody to have kids and a family with. That's stuck with me so hard and resonated for me because I was like, wow, okay, because I got out of my own head. I got out of my own brain of running around, doing all the mom life, doing everything, and remembered that not everyone is like you sitting across the table from you, and not everyone has the same style life as you, but they do deserve the same amount of respect and they deserve the same amount of management style. So that was one of my favorite things from the Jess Collins episode. If you haven't listened to her, that episode was insane. I mean, her knowledge base is just absolutely crazy when it comes to interior design. Something she said that wasn't even really design related, but management related made me a better person. And I've loved that about this podcast is that I can hear someone say something and I know that it's made me a better person.
100%. There was so much in that episode that just inspiring. I remember after the episode, she shared something really special with us. Honestly, it's stuck with me the whole entire time of just the gratefulness of being able to come on and share her story, and just love her to death. Definitely go back and listen to it. Our most recent muse was Kyle Bunting, and we hit the ground running on that episode. There was no intro. So we like to record our intros after the fact anyways, but it was phenomenal because it was so real and just very honest conversations that happened, and it was very organic. One of the biggest things that stuck out with me when we were talking to Kyle about brand and how he got started, he was actually in the television industry, which is very interesting. And talk about those times that when you're not bold and brave and don't step out, sometimes you have to. So his story, and I won't just run it for everybody, but he was literally in the middle of the night, had an idea, and I just afterwards thought, what if that was such a missed opportunity? What if he didn't take that idea of, oh my gosh, I could take this hide stuff and I can make beautiful, luxurious rugs? I mean, if he wouldn't have thought about there wouldn't be hide rugs potentially, or what we called him, the Patchwork Picasso was one of the names. But in all seriousness, how many times do we have a good idea and you just don't step out there and aren't brave, or you think you're going to fail? If you do fail, that is the biggest success you can have. And I think that resonated with me because Bridget and I have a lot of ideas, and sometimes they're like out there. We have so many ideas. For 10 years, we could be executing these ideas. And so we have a lot coming up. We have a lot of exciting things, but I just think about, what if one of those ideas was the next big idea and we didn't execute on it, we didn't lean into it, we didn't explore it, then it would never be of existence. And so I just think that always remember that just at least explore it. At least don't let it just like shelf it in the middle of the night. Really, write it down and look into it, because it could be the next best thing.
I think at the end of the day, we just talked about some of the greatest experiences and things that we've learned from having a podcast. And it just shows that even though we are a commercial interior design podcast, everything we just mentioned has to do with holistically your life and just decisions you're making, or management style, or thinking about things different ways, not necessarily the technical detail that Jess was talking to us about, or, that Kyle was explaining with his rugs or anything like that, but more or less these big picture ideas that can stick with you no matter if you are in this industry or not. And that's something that when it comes to outreach, I think really is a great point to have.
For sure. And there's a lot of different ways to look at all of this. And we hope you learned something today, or were inspired, something sparked some creative thoughts for you. And we're just really excited to share our story and how the life of a design muse, how it all came, where we're at, and where we're headed.
And we can't thank you guys enough for listening and following along. And we have a lot of exciting collaborations coming up, and we can't wait to share them all with you.
Until next time, toodaloos.